Good morning. So thank you for the introduction, Sanjay. I'll get straight into it because you know all about me now. So my topic is really covering three things. So there are three key points, and I'll speak them. First one is really what is the role of supply chain management in the companies? Now, I started Global Supply Chain Group with a group of 3 people out of Booz Allen, and that was in January 2000. We have seen supply chain evolve quite a bit in those 15 years. And it is still evolving. So some of the best CEOs today, they come out of supply chain management. As this skill is becoming more and more critical for business, basically supply chain professionals who do not fully get on board with the supply chain discipline itself, they are wasting a golden opportunity. Second key point is really that today, many supply chain professionals, they're trying to reconcile two opposite ends. On one hand, they hear about what is happening out there from companies like Alibaba that Chris was just talking about. And then they go back to their company and they see what is happening inside their company. And they see two diametrically opposite ends of what the world looks like. And basically, there is a tantalizing array of possibilities, and they're really trying to reconcile this. And if they cannot reconcile it, really they cannot have an impact on the business. And if they can reconcile it and slowly form a path within their company, then they can really have a huge impact on their businesses. And the third key point is about the latest advances in the supply chain management. So as executives respond to the fundamental changes in the business world today, with the globalization, with the technology, with Internet of Things, digitization, robotics, a whole lot of new technology is becoming available and actually commercially being used in supply chains now. There is really a wave after wave of transformations which is being unleashed by the board of directors, by the CEOs within their businesses. So what that does is basically most companies are really grappling with resistance to that transformation. There is a transformation fatigue, you can call it. And every business transformation becomes a massive challenge. Latest advances in supply chain management are really geared to bring everything together to create successful business transformations for the CEOs and the boards. So all these three themes are really interrelated. I'll talk about them one at a time. First, I'll talk about role of supply chain management. That's very simple. As I said, role of professionals, supply chain management professionals, is evolving as I see. From my personal experience, when after having left Booz Allen and Hamilton, I started Global Supply Chain Group. My mentor, who was chairman of one of the biggest companies in Australia, he said, "What, you're going to do supply chain? We don't even allow you in the boardrooms." And today, of course, every board is talking about doing a massive supply chain transformation. So it has evolved quite critically. And today, some of the best CEOs, they come from within supply chain management discipline. Supply chain professionals who do not learn the latest trends and teach these to their CEOs and peers in their companies, they are wasting a golden opportunity. I'm choosing these words very carefully. It is really, if you are a supply chain professional, in the end, it is really your prerogative and duty, in fact, to go and teach what is supply chain to your CEOs. Here is a developing thesis. I only developed it about 4 weeks ago when I was presenting to APAC Forum and to business leaders there. And the thesis is this, that the current trend is this, that companies such as Apple, Amazon, Zara, Uber, Airbnb, and I'll talk a bit about all these companies. They're all in public domain. That's the reason I use them as examples. Unfortunately, a lot of my clients don't like their name to be put up on the board there, even though they are very successful. All these companies, they are being led by supply chain leaders today. Now, prior to this, say go back 10 years, strategists were mainly the CEOs. So Indra Nooyi is an example in PepsiCo, but you look at a lot of CEOs, they're ex-BCG, McKinsey, Booz Allen, those kind of guys. But the world has changed. It has moved. Today, the best CEOs really don't come out of those companies. They come out of supply chain management companies. They come out of people who can integrate the supply chain on a global basis. Now, if you go back further, you can see the trends as I lay them out, and it's a very busy graphic, so you can get the whole presentation from Marie, I guess, or from myself, or Chris, or Sanjay. The presentation will be available to you because there's a lot of material in it. The previous trends are basically around 1900s. CEOs were mainly inventors and creators like Edison and people like that. And then they were builders and makers from 1925 to 50. So these were people like Ford, for example. Going further, from 55 to 70 was the golden era of the Mad Men. That's when the advertising guys took over the world. Basically, advertising was the thing. And most of the CEOs used to come out of marketing and sales. And after that, of course, because there was a lot of expense, then the accountants and finance people took over and cut down the expenses. And in 80s to 90s, human resources guys came over, and they said, okay, let's be a little bit more human-focused. Finally, the strategists came in around 1990 to 2000. And now it is really supply chain management still. So just looking at the supply chain management, again, very busy graphic. I won't try and get through all of it, but I just want to make two key points. There are two dimensions on a successful supply chain management. The horizontal axis is integration. And the level of integration you manage to achieve decides the level of supply chain sophistication in your company. And of course, integration has multiple dimensions. It doesn't have just one dimension of what level of integration you achieve. Also, how much integration you achieve with your suppliers or customers rather than just in-house. So there are multiple dimensions to each one of these dimensions, in fact. The horizontal axis is level of optimization. So you can optimize just the quality. You can optimize quality and cost. You can optimize quality, cost, and revenues. So you can achieve better and better optimization as well. Now, just a little bit about my journey into supply chain management. The key point I want to make is this, that supply chain management is relatively a very new field. Only about 40 years ago, in this world, nobody knew what was supply chain management. In fact, there was no such thing as supply chain management. First project in the world in supply chain management was done somewhere in Germany, Switzerland. One of the people who was on that project is now one of our senior partners in Germany. And he tells me the story, but I would rather have him tell the story than I do it myself. But the key point is this, that we all in supply chain management are really not digital natives. We are, in a way, we are migrants. We come from logistics, from transportation, from supply, for example, from procurement, and from multiple areas. I mean, I started my journey as a sea cadet long time ago in 1983. And I worked my way up as a master mariner and basically nearly lost the use of my dominant hand, which was the left hand, in an accident long time ago when I was 18 years old. Luckily recovered. I traveled around the world for 12 years, going from port to port and learning how people did things. And basically learning how you can combine good practices from here with good practices there and actually make things even better. And that is my journey. I decided to study more at one stage. I said, I'll go and do my MBA. I did that at Australian Graduate School of Management in Sydney. I was competing with some of the top people in Australia, with top management consultants and chartered accountants and lawyers. Came nearly top of my class, joined Booz Allen. And then I joined Booz Allen and Hamilton for one specific purpose, to learn supply chain management, because that was the company which invented supply chain. And when I joined there, I found that all the people who had done the job, they had actually left the company. So that is one of the reasons why I actually left as well and created this company. And now, basically, when we started in 2000, we had nothing. We had no brand name, no books, no intellectual property. And now we have done 400 successful projects around the world, written 5 successful books, number of very successful reports for chief operating officers, chief financial officers on supply chain management. And now I go and present to people like heads of states or a meeting of business leaders from 22 countries, and I just talk about value of supply chain management. And I say all this just to inspire at least few people in this room that this profession is worth getting into. I'll also spend a little bit of time talking about my mentor, who's taught me a lot about supply chain, Dr. Wolfgang Pasch. He is based in Germany. There is nobody active today in supply chain management than more experience in it. The reason being, he was on the team that invented supply chain management. So I asked him, when you did this project, there was already materials management, there was already logistics, there was already production and inventory planning. So what was the big thing that inspired you to create supply chain management? And his response was very simple. He says, everybody was working in their individual silos. So production guys wouldn't talk to purchasing guys, who wouldn't talk to the inventory guys. And it was a big breakthrough to really get them talking to each other in the first place. So we are privileged to have him as a senior partner in our company. I want to acknowledge him. Now, role of supply chain management. I believe today, supply chain management may be one of the toughest jobs on the earth. Now, there is a TV program called Most Difficult Jobs on Earth or something. I believe supply chain management may be one of those. The reason is 3 reasons, really. First one is ambiguity. Nobody knows what supply chain is. People have their own definitions of supply chain. I have seen so many companies in the last 20 years or so of management consulting, and every company has its own supply chain, definition of supply chain. In fact, even within a company, everybody has his own definition of supply chain. The second thing is uncertainty. Basically, supply chain management is, because of the ambiguity, it's so difficult to really get the credit for a job well done. And it's so easy to get the blame for somebody else's faults. And third thing is complexity. With the globalization, supply chain has become so complex that you just can't do it in your head. In fact, you can't do it with even the tools, the IT tools, which were invented 10 years ago. And that is a huge problem. So let's talk about ambiguity a little bit. Here's a typical company. It's like supply chain is like an elephant and 6 blind men, as I say sometimes. So if you talk to procurement, they say, we are supply. Just add chain to it and it becomes supply chain. And then you talk to logistics and everybody thinks logistics is the supply chain. And then you go within operations and they say, no, supply chain is really all about production planning or inventory management. And then you go to finance and they are really struggling to, if you talk to a typical CFO, he thinks either it is logistics or it is procurement. And he's sort of flipping between the two. Sales, well, for sales, supply chain is really the easy target. They are the people they blame when the customers don't get their orders. Then you talk to external associations, and there's quite a few of them in logistics, in procurement, in warehousing, and they're all trying to tag supply chain management to their name. Now, that is okay if they actually get into supply chain. But a lot of them are still doing just logistics or procurement or whatever else they were doing earlier. And that is a problem. Let's talk a little bit about complexity. I showed you a very complex chart about integration and optimization quite deliberately so that you know how complex supply chain optimization and integration is really. And there are multiple levels of it. And I'm sure you know all this because it's probably day-to-day job for many of you guys. But the fact is just this, that there are multiple levels in both of these things. When I was a third officer a long time ago, I was in charge of, no, second officer, I was in charge of navigating a ship. And my only job was to optimize the route from point A to point B. Sometimes we had 6 loading ports and 6 discharge ports, and I was optimizing the navigation, the route. As I became chief officer, now I'm optimizing the cargo and the route. As I became a captain, now I'm not only optimizing the route and the cargo, but also the cost, the fuel cost. Fuel is a huge expense. It's 33% of the cost for any shipping company. So as you rise, the optimization keeps becoming bigger and bigger job. One more point is this, that no matter where I go, and I've been in these kind of boardrooms probably more than 500 times, maybe much more than that, where there's a CEO sitting there and there's a head of sales or head of marketing, and there's 3 or 4 other regional heads of sales. And then there's, of course, CFO and Chief Operating Officer, and there is head of supply chain. And it almost becomes like an inquisition. Head of sales will come up with all the problems of customers who have not gotten their delivery, and then suddenly everybody will start pointing fingers at the supply chain guy. And he's in the executive rooms. I see it every day. That because of the traditional structures and because of the fact that sales and marketing is highly represented in that room, supply chain ends up getting a lot more blame than it should be getting.